Hey, you guys, it's Chris and
Edmond, Dawsnub, Sandor.
all right. And we wanted to add a few things to our first episode here, so we're going to join these two
I
together.
just needed more time. Last time we were on a tight schedule, so.
Yeah, and we were like walking all over Guam.
God.
We did like our 3-mile walk,
Ew.
and it wasn't really as hot out, but it was enough to we were.
Plus there was like construction. They were like taking down trees.
Yeah, we were like dragging ass getting back to our operating area. So there's a couple of segments that I thought I'd bring up. Is Edmond is homeless right now, and we've been asked by legal aid not to mention certain things, names of family members, because we don't want anything to happen to the family members. So even though they've kind of done us kind of wrong, I mean, that's putting it mildly, that's in G-rated terms. But a lot of what you encounter is, there's this double standard, almost double speak, almost like an Alpha Juliet episode where he's going on about double speak and how they'll say, hey, you have to do this, this, and this, and then you do that and it's not enough, or it's the exact opposite of what they wanted, right? So in our family, or former in-laws, I guess, if you want to call it that, or the family that we've been removed from, is that, I came from the other side of the tracks. I'm an abuse survivor. That's a story for another time. And, I met Edmond's mother, and, she encouraged me to be that forensic scientist that I wanted to be. And I went ahead and did that, even to and it wasn't to a medically diagnosed extent, but it was more than I should have. When you're in college, you're drinking and playing the music loud and all that stuff, and then next thing you know, you've got a mountain of beer cans or something, next to you. And sometimes that's a coping mechanism. It's not an excuse, but it's, sometimes people use that as a coping mechanism. And now that I'm older, I would love to be completely trashed out of my mind because, Melissa, Edmond's mother is already gone. But it's like you have this understanding. I want to say, who was it? I want to say it was Jay from Insane Clown Posse was saying in an interview with a YouTube influencer that he was saying that when you allow yourself to become vulnerable, that's when you see the double speak in other people. And you'll see where you have a goal in life. You have, you want to be a pro wrestler, you want to be a computer programmer, you want to work with next gen AI, you want to do all this other stuff, right? Whatever it is that you have that voice in the back of your mind saying, hey, you could do this. And my mother would say, well, don't get your hopes up. And, well, you got to think realistically. You got to, and then my in-laws, my mom and dad-in-law would say, well, you really need to know where your place is. And then other family members at the reunion would say, oh, you need to get with the narrative, that sort of thing. And then there's that time where you just say, hey, if I'm not part of the narrative, I get it. But I'm not going to validate myself, my own existence, every 5 minutes around these people, right? Because here's the thing. If you got all these people around you that are trying to always fit in, trying to fit that narrative, they're never going to change, right? And then when you go out and say, well, hey, F these people, and you start talking like Violent J in a regular interview, and say, hey, I know what it's like to feel vulnerable. I'm homeless and unemployed right now. You know, I'm putting together a project. How many people do you know? And I'm not saying we're any better than anyone else. How many people do you know that went out there and said, hey, I'm homeless and unemployed, or my hours are getting cut, you know, or I'm told I'm a retired forensic scientist in my case, and I'm told I'm overqualified for work, any kind of work, right? Even like corporate work, right? You know, and all these other violent things that are being told to people all across the country. Oh, you're the wrong skin color. What was it? The insurance company only gave grants to people of a certain, color, right? And I've seen family members that have made like white nationalists look like Boy Scouts, like from the way the family has treated us. And you can say, hey, I can feel vulnerable being out there. I don't have any excuses. You know, there was probably some times when I could have took better care of myself. You know, I could have stayed awake and, a couple extra days or 24, 48 hours to get another chapter done or another project done or something like that. I could have worked until I died, of a stroke, or, I had to go like Bill Goldberg on a manager at work or something, or whatever. But there comes a time when you're like, okay, let's bring it on. I want to see anyone else in our family, except for the people in Tennessee and Arizona, become homeless, be left for dead, unemployed. It's a matter of public record now. There was an email that was widely circulated and commented on and approved by other family members that say, we will make sure Chris's brains are all over the inside of that car. And that's going to hold up in court. That's how that works. And my son, Edmond here, he goes to wrestling camp right after he loses his mom to cancer, gets made fun of and like dumped on by his own family, his own adult cousins that he grew up around, are like forbidden to even talk to him, to say hi. Like, hey Edmund, you good? Like, it was like, I think one of the cousins sent me a thing saying, hey, just delete this after you read it, and I just want to say hi, and you have all this vulnerability that is fear-based, right? And you're told that you're not good enough, or you're just stupid, or whatever. Now, let's say that Edmund and I followed the fucking narrative, whatever that was, and then the target goal keeps moving, right? Because when they say, hey, you got to follow the narrative, well, what happens after you're done following the narrative? What happens after that? What if that narrative falls apart? What if whoever the oligarchs in our family that make the rules or make that narrative, they die of old age, right? Time waits up for no one. And it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to wait for that to happen for me and Edmund and I to get on with our goals in life, right? So, you can be like Edmund here, has autism, is working, in a grocery store.
2-3 days a week.
Yeah, his hours got cut down to 2 to 3.
At least my manager's giving me extra hours.
Yeah, because they had like so many people quit.
Yeah, the night staff had to quit, had to cancel.
Yeah, they had to cancel the whole third shift.
I had to help one of the guys in the back, like
you were like emptying out the delivery truck.
Yeah.
So they had to cancel the third shift because they couldn't find anyone to show up, and it was like a there's a manager there that's that we've been asked not to name right now, at least right now, because legal aid is dealing with that. So you're dealing with all this stuff, you honestly, it's like, well, do we pay a bill or do we eat? And right now we've got like these, in our family we call it a container of colon blow, these protein shakes, right, that we have as a backup plan, and I tried one of them out the other day and they were really good. Either that or I was really hungry. So, and here's the one thing you don't see my son and I complaining about. We're homeless, unemployed, hours cut, being told that we're not good enough for the traditional world anymore, thrown overboard by a family that wanted us dead, that's in writing. And okay, yeah, we're going through an annoying situation, and we're in a really vulnerable position right now, but we're going to make this happen, And so you see like other people that you might be related to, or even your friends or people you thought were your friends, is saying, hey, you're a fucking sellout if you go out and make this happen. Imagine the whole pen and paper D&D group, right, are wrestling fans, and you go to Booker T's and work with, you train with Booker T and Amber Pritchard, and then no one wants to talk to you from your gaming group again because, oh, you're a fucking sellout, you went out and actually did it, And it was funny. I'm working on a really colorful project later on this year. I was just bouncing it off a couple ideas off of a coworker at another assignment, and they're talking about getting triggered and flipping out and all this other. I was like, man, it's like, is this what the world wants? They want people just so fucking fear-based that they're going to get triggered every 5 minutes, and then you're dealing, you and I are dealing with our own issues and stuff, but we still said, hey, we're homeless, I've got a couple of job applications in, just within walking distance of where we're at.
Some of them pay twice as much as the Kingsdale.
Yeah, and we're like, okay, well, we're going to do the podcast in the car. We'll close the car doors if the train comes by because we're right next to railroad tracks.
I love trains.
The car is dead. Like church folks check in on us. There's a church guy, and then don't mention his name.
Parks next to us.
Parks next to us to make sure no one bugs us, and then we're gonna do Edmond's schoolwork for college, and then start up on the next episode of the podcast and a few other things that Where's the fucking excuses at? The only excuse is the amount of time in the day. Or we're just because we're outside most of the time right now. I mean, you can only take so much ball sweat and heat and everything, and it's just like
really hot.
And
next week.
Yeah, so it's one of those weird things where it's like, are you gonna have excuses all the fucking time? I think I had more excuses when we had the house, Edmond,
right? Yeah.
Than I have now, and our uncle in Dayton used to say, well, you need to light a fire under your ass, Chris. You need to do this, this, and this. And then we'd get like a mainstream project done that's on store shelves, and then we get canceled for it.
Yep. Or
they say, oh, I didn't know what you were trying to prove. I was like, I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm not trying to impress people that hate my guts, And, everyone's dealing with their own stuff. But if you get to the point where like the people at the gaming table no longer talk to you, it's like talk to someone else, It's like, And then when they say, oh, well, I couldn't really say anything because I would have got canceled, fucking grow a pair, you know? And you know how many pro wrestlers started out living in a car? I mean,
I can count on one hand how much.
yeah, probably more than one hand, but
16, 20,
yeah,
25.
I mean,
even from back in the day.
Yeah, like Darby Allin,
Mick Foley,
Mick
Steve
Foley.
Austin, Roxanne Perez, Matt Riddle.
Right, all those guys, and male, female, something in between, and I think Danhausen lived in his car in New York.
I don't
or
remember
something like that
one, but
yeah,
I think it was.
Yeah, and it might have been a different city. But and then they didn't let anything get in their way. I mean, you hear some of the old stories of like Kevin and Scott and Sean, like traveling in a car 300 days out of the year, and like by the second month, like the car smells like ass, and empty fucking beer cans everywhere, people having to piss out the window, all that stuff. And some things were annoying, but they fucking made it happen. They stayed at it, right? And a lot of times you'll hear like people will say, hey, when I was first starting out, it was all psychology. Yeah, you could get all buffed out and get a nice physique and be able to do the kamikaze jumps off the top ropes and all that stuff. But if you didn't have the psychology to do it, or to even be willing to learn, then you were completely screwed, right? Like there's some people that Tony Schiavone and Conrad had talked about that were just human gutter balls. Like they could have played like the good guys or the baby faces, but in real life they were villains, right? And then we've actually met some people that played villains, and they were cool as hell. They were like real life superheroes in real life. I'm like, holy cow, this guy's actually pretty tight, So there's been some people that have really jumped out at us over the years. And there was this time when I worked at, I was a volunteer EMT at the Arnold Classic, and it was when Bailey was first starting as she was a cheerleader.
Yeah,
and
originally she was.
Yeah, I think she wore like the yellow pants or something like that.
Something like that. She always loved colors.
Yeah, and I hadn't followed wrestling in like several years, probably since the end of the Attitude Era. And this Bailey girl keeps coming out. She did like 3 matches in a row.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, she's pretty hot too. And so she's this really just had this God's way, had this just gorgeous smile. And don't get me wrong, she's hot as can be.
She's Latino.
Right. And talking about being oiled up. And like there were some other people that I had asked to volunteer as security for like the meet and greet for WWE. And I think I met Kalisto, and God, it was one other person. There, of course, Bailey was there, and then there was.
I'm trying to remember. It's been so long.
Yeah, it's been a minute, but Bailey really stood out, right? And I'm like, man, this girl's going to go really far. And Alexa Bliss, duh. Yeah, how could I forget her?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and Bailey was saying something. She was talking to this like 12 or 13-year-old girl, and Bailey was saying about how all the nonsense she had to go through, and when she was younger and wanting to be a pro wrestler, and she liked watching like the old WWF era stuff with her dad and her uncle and everything. And she just was like, hey, I know I can make this happen. And I think she was going to go into a medical field or something. In as far as college was concerned, but then she was like, hey, let's do this wrestling thing. We can make this work, And bam, there's, here she is. And, we know the Bailey character for today. And Edmond, what was some of the, like, you had as a teenager, you had like a mild crush on Bailey for a while there,
for
right?
a moment there,
And you weren't the only one, trust me. That's a very normal thing. Yeah. And and I'm not saying this to be like unpleasant or anything, but Bailey's stacked up there. And like, as I had seen where in an interview where she was like taped down or something like that. And so, and then there is the thing, Finn Balor. And because he was in, what was he? He was in Impact or something like that, or New Japan. New Japan. And he had that, he had the demon character. And who was that one guy that, he was just, they spun his character off like some like geriatric version of Scott Hall. Was it Baron Corbin?
I think so.
Yeah, it was like the most one-sided match ever, like on a pay-per-view, where it's Baron Corbin against Finn Balor as the Demon.
Yeah, that was at SummerSlam 5 years ago.
Yeah, and then for Finn to have like the Finn Balor character and then the Demon character, and that was pretty rad. Edmond, how do you like the Demon character or the regular character?
I like the normal character.
The normal one. And what was that? Like he did like the Heimlich maneuver to Bobby Roode off of
30-foot ladder.
Yeah.
Ooh, that was kind of intense because even for him, he was like,
you sure you want me to do
got
that?
Injured after that, so.
Right. So there's other people that stood out, at least in my own vibe, is Bill Goldberg was always one of my favorites. I remember watching him in late 90s WCW, and I was like, holy shit, I've never seen anyone like this before, And I might be in the minority here, but when I was younger, when I was a kid, like I was a huge Ultimate Warrior fan. And, I mostly went to train wreck schools growing up, so everyone else was like a Hulk Hogan fan. And but I was the odd one out, rooting for Jim, and it's interesting to see how it's okay for you to be the odd one out. Back in the day, when I was my son's age, younger than my son, younger than Edmond here, it was, oh, you gotta go with the flow and fit in. You gotta do this, and this, or if not, you're a throwaway person. And then you become the odd one out because you don't need to fit in, right? You don't need to, and by society's term of fitting in, they want you to stay to your own kind, your own vibe, your own kind of identification. And then when you're the person who can like even go into regular day work and say, I can work with anyone, male, female, something in between, I don't care what your skin color is, religion, hey, let's get this done, right? And it's weird how that's the odd thing now. It's it's kind of odd to see that because everyone a while back talked about inclusion and equity and everyone getting along and working together. And then when you can be that person who can go in and work with anyone, whether it's in the ring or in, just in regular daily life, that's almost like it makes you the odd person out. Booker T was talking with Brad the other day about how when Booker was a little bit younger in his earlier days, he was, him and Stevie Ray went up to like this bodega, which is like a stop and rob, right? And then it wasn't the greatest neighborhood. These guys pull up around them and they robbed these thugs, robbed this guy. And Booker T's like, man, I've got like 5 or 6 gold chains on me, and I also got, a couple of guns on me, right? And he was like, thank God those guys didn't roll up on me or I wouldn't be here, And when you have that demeanor that says, okay, why don't they try to do something to me and see what happens, all right? And, there's that one situation about a month ago where Edmond was being dumped on, and it was like, okay, why don't you follow us to the car and see what happens, all right? The same manager wants to follow black folks to their cars and accuse them of shoplifting, and Edmond has a church friend that bought him a soda, and this guy's flipping out, going off the hook, well, we can do this, this, and this to you and all that. And he starts threatening us with a firearm, like verbally, and then...
Even when I was off the clock.
When he was off the clock. And then the cops show up, and the cops are like, yeah, this guy's got 4 counts of domestic battery. He just likes to run his mouth, And it turns out the same manager is a PlayStation Online scammer, because he has to feed his gambling addiction at the Hollywood casino. And so now we're looking at 2 cops right now.
Yeah.
And
there's more there.
And then there's more there down at the end.
There's one at the Gecko. Yeah.
And there's one at the Gecko. And we're in a white neighborhood, right? There's more legal possession of firearms in a 1.5 mile square radius than there probably is in the entire state of Iowa. And they have to put 6 cops at the building to protect the one manager. They're not there for you and I and everyone else. They're there to protect the one manager, right? And so there's ways of just looking at the world and the negativity of the world and saying, you know what, it's just not worth the effort sometimes, And it's not worth putting up with a society that tells you you're supposed to be afraid. And you're the odd one out when you say, well, I don't really watch Netflix. I watched a movie for an official review the other day, and that was pretty fun because it had Jason Statham in it, and he was always cool dude. But I'm not there binge watching stuff, and it's like, I can be that creative person, and it's unique when you're not the one who's afraid of the outside world. There's, like Mick Foley said, during the Hell in a Cell watch through with Mark, Mick is saying, I've been scared a lot of times, and I've done some scary things, but I still went out and did stuff. And that's where Edmond and I are at right now, and there's a lot of sensational nonsense that put us in this situation that all I can say is, I could have worked 24/7 and we probably would have still been in this situation, or I would have been dead. There have been people that we don't talk to anymore. They said, well, you should have worked until you died, and like people we've known for more than 10 years, right? And people who've tried to cancel us, and it's weird because you're in that situation where you're around people. I was on a cruise one time, and the guy across the table in our group wants to start ranting and raving and raising hell about the businessman that was different from the rest of us, you know. Back in that time, it was right before the pandemic, and it was like, dude, no one cares how much you hate that guy. You know, we're on a cruise. Let's have a good time. You know, don't be such a bitch. And then, of course, the pandemic happens later on, and then this person is saying they're exalting themselves about how they wanted to go brick someone because someone didn't wear a mask to a nightclub. And then the very next week, he's saying, "Oh well, his this guy's view of the world is supposedly better than everyone else's, so he doesn't have to wear a mask now." You know, and he's got like what, 5 or 6 jabs, whatever. If that's your vibe, that's your vibe. But, pardon me, but you don't go out and just force your beliefs on anyone else and say your way is the right way, you know. Now, there's probably some people out there that are saying, hey, if I was dealing with that shit that you guys were going through with your family, I would have went a fucking Cannibal Corpse, you know. I would have went old school Chris Barnes on these fuckers, man, you know. Or fucking Sepultura, you know, like the Morbid Visions and Bestial Devastation album, you know. And maybe there's going to come a time where that's very applicable. You know, but right now it's like, okay, hey, let's do the podcast in the car, since we can't say stuff out loud yeah, we can't say stuff out loud in the Wi-Fi hubs and all that. So we'll just like, cool, we'll do the podcast in the car, and then, you know, we can always run in and charge the phone or the iPad or something, you know, and then we'll upload the stuff as we go. And, you know, I've been around some YouTube influencers that wanted to help us out, but we already had to be at like this God level, you know, 6-figure income already type of person. We could only hang out with certain folks if we were, they had all this like morality bullshit based, you know, stuff that, and it's like, man, that's like that's like asking our uncle in Dayton, like, hey, can we use the basement to do a podcast? And he's like, well, I can't really have people talking at my house, you know, and he goes on and on and on. There's always that list of excuses where it's like, hey, okay, we'll do the podcast in the car, right? So, you know, as whether you want to be a pro wrestler or not, or you just, whatever it is that you want to do, don't feel overly grossed out about feeling vulnerable, because when you got to put yourself out there sometimes, and it's like, man, you know, you look at some of the people around you or some people that you know, if you took away their car or their job, or, you know, they had to go move in with a buddy or something, how suicidal they would be, you know. And it's done by design. Here's that Alpha Juliet stuff, you know. A lot of this fear is done by design. It's designed to make you discouraged. And I don't like to use the word depression anymore. And I'm not a doctor. I'm just saying this is my own words. Depression is more like discouraged. And I'm not going to let things discourage me as much as it used to be, if not at all, right? You know, I'm not going to let things discourage me to get things done, because we already know how our family's going to treat us. They're going to treat us like a disease, you know, that we're better off dead. Their words, not ours. And you know, it's just like, man, these people could have just told us 10 years ago and we would have saved a lot of time. but they probably just wanted us there as, narcissistic supply or whatever it was. You probably need like a psychologist to figure out some of this family stuff. But Edmond, before we sign off, now that we got some of the self-help stuff out of the way, some of the psychology, what are some of the things that we're going to be reviewing pretty soon here?
We'll be reviewing Stardom, since that's really hard to find in the States. Some of the WWE and AEW pay-per-views, yeah.
All right. And all in, that's today, isn't it?
2 weeks next weekend, I think.
Oh, next weekend, okay. Yeah,
we already had SummerSlam, so.
Right. And so we'll do SummerSlam. What we'll do is we'll do...
we got Stardom first.
Yeah, we're going to do some Stardom walkthroughs on Patreon.
Yep.
And I have to download the roster or the match list.
Yeah, title card or something.
Yeah, the title card for it. So, we thought, well, hey, let's just make this happen. And then we do have a couple of other projects that we're working on that will be available on Patreon as well. And, we're just not going to let anything get in our way. I mean, it's kind of annoying because, it's like, do we eat or do we pay a bill? And we can't always, sometimes these church folks aren't always going to be around,
Yeah.
And we don't want to just leech off people or anything like that. So, that's why we started the Patreon. And, I wish I had my son's strength when I was his age. To be homeless, mostly unemployed, and living in a dead car, I would have just checked out, but not to lunch. I mean, if I was in that situation when I was his age, because I didn't have
the tech.
The tech stuff, and then I had my mother was a professional angry person, and my dad had passed away, and no matter what I did or said, it just wasn't enough, and whether it was at work or outside of work or something, I was always just like fucking screw up to the outside world. And when you look back at it now, and I'm what, 45?
I think so.
Yeah, I stopped counting after my wife died. But it's like you turn shit around and you look at it, and it's like you realize how fucked the rest of the world is. And yet it's like they wanted you to be upset. They wanted you to be depressed or discouraged. They want you to feel vulnerable. And when you say, okay, bring it on, bitch, and see what happens. And that's what I should have actually told my mother, My mom was this person that would call up HR at my job and want to know what I was talking to, what I would say to my co-workers in the break room, and just paranoid as hell, and it was just like, man, it finally got to the point where HR was standing up for me, and if I had had the strength that my son has right now, that if I had had that when I was 19 years old, I mean, I would have been probably the next Goldberg or something. And for my son to be left for dead by the rest of his family in the situation that he's in, and he's like, hey, we're going to do the podcast, then I'm going to do my schoolwork, then I'm going to go work my overtime because I have no one else to help him out. Then when we get done, I'll finish up my next class, and then tomorrow we're going to do all, podcasts and nerdcore and all that other stuff. And then Tuesday, it's like, oh, okay, we got to make a whole new set list of stuff to make, And I think that's what really scares people in the outside world. When you're getting dumped on by your own friends at the pen and paper table, a D&D night or something, or they just stop talking to you at all. I mean, we got back from Vegas, from Brazzers, AVN, and people were pissed at us.
All but like 2 or 3.
Yeah, and like people here in town, like we had people that we personally knew, like in real life on social media, like, dude, if I was around Bridget B, I wouldn't be able to keep my hands off of her. It's like, I know, right? And, stuff like that. So, I mean, we're going to get out of this situation. It's just a matter of us.
The next few weeks, yeah.
Yeah, in a few weeks, things are going to kind of,
start fall into place.
Yeah, fall into place. And what I've noticed, and I'm not a doctor, so I'm just saying what Edmond and I have done. When I wanted to give up and just say fuck it, and then we're like, well, let's hang in there. Let's work on this other project. So I wrote a chapter in my next book. All of a sudden, certain things started to fall into place, and like we didn't have food money for like almost 2 weeks.
Almost a month.
Yeah, almost a month.
This past spring, in April.
And you can actually hear the fat melting off me.
We were basically living off Spam and like chunky soup cans.
Oh God, and just talk about cleaning you out.
So gross.
I mean, just came out like rocket fuel. We had saved this case of Spam
that we had before the lockdown.
Yeah, before the pandemic. And we're like, well, when the zombies attack, we'll just give the in-laws the Spam, right? Or these crazy fuckers from 161 that tried to blackmail us. When they started one of them showed up at the house and was politely asked to remove themselves from our porch by the neighbors. Not in a polite way, though. And then we're like, well, fuck, we're gonna be living off Spam and Campbell's soup and everything. And but we made it happen, right? We made things work, and we stayed at it. And we noticed that I was told that I was too positive in the workplace, and it was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, you're too positive. You need to know where your place is. And they were trying to tell me that I needed to be more afraid of them. And one person met me out in the parking lot, and I got removed real quick after that. So sometimes these managers, they don't realize when they're towing the fucking line, when they're reading off the cue cards, when they're pointing their fingers at people and screaming at people, that if it's not the fucking aneurysm that gets them, it's either legally they're going to be dealt with, or they're going to get a Goldberg spear when the time comes, right? And so that's why instead of just living in fear, you just face everything and rise, no matter what's going on, right? And Edmond, do you have anything else to add?
I think that's it.
Okay. Well, thanks for listening in. I know this is kind of long-winded, and it's kind of a combination of self-help and, we'll be getting into pro wrestling stuff. But you have to have your psychology in the mind. What was it? I think it was Ice Cube or Mike Tyson said, if you don't have control of your emotions, and granted, you're going to have times where you slip up from time to time, but if you don't have control of your emotions are going to be in control of you. And, it's just, sometimes you just got to put yourself out there and say, hey, you know what? I'm not the best speaker. I have the ums, ands, you knows. And I've been canceled several times. I'll put below the links for Amazon for my first 2 books, Neural Upgrade, Living Beyond Plan A. It's kind of like self-help meets Stargate, and then Attic, which is like a survival horror. It takes place in the late 90s, so something a little bit outside of left field. And we will see you guys pretty soon. So thanks for listening.
Thanks for watching.
All right.